Let's face it, sometimes you just want to change the ride height on these old trucks. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can change things like wheels, tires, suspension components. It's all part of personalizing your truck. But you don't have to do major surgery to make some interesting changes. A bolt-on suspension kit on any truck lowers the center of gravity, can improve the handling, and it's a straightforward process that you can do on your own. The stance of a vehicle, how it sits, is really important. Changing the stance can majorly change the look of a vehicle. If you've made a complete vehicle plan like we have on our truck, well, you probably have at least considered if you want to keep what the factory did or change it to your taste. And there's no wrong answer here. It's all about your vision. The factory sets the stance with the maximum amount of wheel travel and suspension function combined with comfort so that the platform appeals to as many potential customers as possible. For us, when we're fixing up or restoring a truck, well, we get to decide what the function is and how we want it to look. So if you've decided that your truck is maybe no longer a work truck and you want it to look a little cooler or maybe sleeker, you can lower the ride height, sometimes without a lot of trouble. Now, every make of truck has a different suspension design, so you'll have to do some research to see what's available for your truck. Depending on your goals, you may find what you're looking for in the LMCTruck catalogs. For our truck, there are 3 different options for changing the ride height. Now, there is a way to change the vehicle's stance without doing any mechanical changes at all, and that's with a simple wheel and tire change. We picked out these Legend 5 wheels from the LMCTruck catalog because of the cool retro style, but also they're 8.5 inches wide, which is 1.5 inches wider than the factory wheel that came on this truck, 7 inches. So what that does is give us more options when it comes to a performance tire. And we've got a 245/40/18 tire on here, which gives us enough sidewall for a smooth ride, but also it lifts it up with the 18-inch diameter and gives it a more modern look. Now, you can measure right away with the lower profile tire. We're going to get 1.5 inches of drop all the way around just by adding this wheel and tire package. So it's going to make the truck look lower, but what it's not going to do is change the relationship between the top of the wheel and the body panels. The only way to change that, to lower that down, is with mechanical parts, i.e. a drop kit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The new wheels and tires look really good on this truck, even though the chrome sport wheels looked better than the factory steel wheels that came on this thing. That said, they fit perfectly too, and that's because LMCTruck has done the work for you with the wheels in their catalog. The offset and backspace is right for these trucks. You need to know how to measure a wheel. It's really simple. You need to know 4 measurements: width, diameter, the backspace, and the offset. The width is measured from the inside of the beads, not the outside. Ours is 7 inches wide. Diameter is also measured inside of the bead and straight across the wheel. This one is 15 inches. Backspace is measured from the hub mounting surface to the back of the bead, and this one is 4.5 inches. Offset is the relationship of the mounting surface to the center of the wheel. Our center is right here, and 1/2 of 7 inches is 3.5 inches, and I'll mark it. I'll mark the backspace of 4.5 inches, which gives us a 1-inch difference offset to the outside of the wheel. This gives us a 1-inch positive offset. So now that you know a little bit about measuring your wheel, here's how to measure and see if it'll fit on the truck. So this is going to give me a seat of the pants way to tell what size of wheel and tire package I can put under this fender. And I've got some strings. Basically it's a plumb bob. I've got a lug nut on the bottom of a string and a point up here. So my outside one is the inside of the fender lip itself. My lug nut is right here holding the string down. Now this is important here. This is the mounting surface of the wheel hub itself. This is what goes against the mounting flange of the wheel that is going to determine backspace and offset. So this one back here, I've got it about about 6 inches away from the frame rail, about 3.5 inches away from the control arm. That way, in a lock-to-lock turn, I've got plenty of clearance. I'm not going to have any interference. If I turn sharp and the inside of the wheel, it's not going to hit anything. So what that tells me is how wide I can go and where my center point is going to be, how much backspace. So before we measure, we're going to verify that everything is straight up and down, using a straight edge on the floor. This is pretty good. Now this guy is being held with gravity. If I don't disturb it, put it against the flange and I just measure my strength, and it's pretty much straight up and down. So I'll wait for him to settle down. And here, that's pretty good right there. That gives me a reference of inside dimension, outside dimension, and where it's going to mount up to the hub. I'm going to square this pretty well to the vehicle using another straight edge. I'm going to get a center line on my string, and I'm just going to make a reference line on the floor. So this one, well, let's just say he's right there. This one, this is my hub mounting surface right there. And inside is right there. Now I've got 3 reference marks that I can easily put a tape measure on and give me dimensions. So from the inside to the outside, I've got 11 inches. So that tells me I can easily put an 11-inch wheel on this vehicle without interference on the fender and without interference on my suspension components or the frame rail. With 3 strings, I can put an 11-inch wheel with 6 1/4 backspace and a 3/4 inch positive offset. That gets me really close within range as to what kind of wheel and tire I can put on this truck. The lowering kit we chose is the least invasive. It's a shackle and spindle kit that doesn't require any cutting of the frame rails. It should get us a 2-inch drop in the front and 4 inches in the rear. Your catalog has tips to properly order the right kit for your truck. The back half of the suspension lowering kit consists of 2 parts. This is a drop shackle for the rear and a dropped spring hanger for the front. They also supply hardware for this equipment, except for the cross bolts. So looking under here, giving it an inspection, and soaking everything in a good penetrating oil, we got a bonus. So when I hold this drop shackle up, it's exactly the same as the one that's there. The previous owner just saved us about an hour. So to remove the old spring hanger, we've got to use a grinder, grind the heads off the studs that the factory put in there so we can replace them with these fasteners. And the new spring hanger, glove up, glasses, be safe. Grinding the heads off the factory studs takes a couple of minutes per stud using an electric grinder. Next stop is to remove the leaf spring eye bolt and drop the spring out of the way. An enormous pry bar will help remove the factory hanger, but it takes a little effort. We ground the rest of the studs off flush to the frame and drove them out of the backside with a hammer. Next, the spring eye bolt gets reinstalled in the new drop hanger. Then we can jack it back up into place. Note that I've got jack stands placed under the chassis and I'm only jacking up the leaf spring to raise it up. Be safe. Make sure your jack stands are placed correctly and that your floor is good and flat, and never use jack stands on gravel. We drilled the holes in the frame out to match the diameter of the new hardware, then bolted them in. That takes care of the rear part of the drop kit, but while we're here, we might as well take a look at the brakes. What you're looking for is the amount of thickness on the pad lining and to see if it's even, as well as the inside of the rotor surface itself. So on the drum itself, we've got a lot of material right here. That's good. It hasn't been worn thin. And as I run my finger over this surface, I don't feel a shoulder here or here. Right here you see the witness mark from the pad pressing against the drum surface. Everything is good here. What you're looking for when you see your pads is them sitting symmetrically. That means the same distance apart from the hub. And also, you're looking at the brake friction material here on the pad. Is the actual brake shoe. And it's thick. They look like they're fairly new. Everything else is sitting like it's sitting. There's no moisture in the back that would show me that the cylinder would be leaking or the axle seal would be leaking. Everything is in good shape. So my guess is that our previous owner did a brake job before he sold this truck. And while I really appreciate the free brake job, what I don't appreciate is this. You guys with sharp eyes have noticed this little stub sticking out. This is a connection for the parking brake cable that's been cut off. So my guess is the axle's been changed and we've got a little bit of work to do. That's a project for another day. We're going to call this a win right now. The front part of the suspension drop is actually very simple. It's just a drop spindle, which just changes the relationship of the pin to the upper and lower mounting points. So effectively, you get the same suspension travel, and you just move your wheel up in the wheel arch. Putting the spindle on, we got to get some parts out of the way, starting with the brake caliper. The caliper unbolts from the backside, and we use cable ties to secure it out of the way. All right. We're going to prepare for wheel bearing grease. Messy. The dust cap comes easily off with a flat screwdriver. The cotter pin comes out with needle nose pliers. The castle nut gets removed, so the rotor assembly practically falls off. The dust shield will get cleaned up and reinstalled onto the new drop spindle. Don't forget to remove the cotter pins first. The upper and lower spindle nuts get partially loosened, then the ball joint pins are released with a hammer blow before removal. We're reusing the castle nuts, but installing new cotter pins on all points. Now, I came fully prepared to replace the inner and outer wheel bearings in this rotor, even the rotor if we needed to. Inner and outer bearings and seals all comes from the LMCTruck catalog, even hardware rotors. However, just like the rear brakes had a fresh job, the front ones did too. These rotors are in really good shape. There's no ridge, there's no wear, there's no grooves. Everything is in nice, brand new condition. There's no burnt spots. Everything looks really good. So that tells me that the bearings weren't overheated and they're probably brand new and probably really good. So we can look at them. They're new. So all we're going to do is repack them, put them back on. I like to clean as much of the old grease off as possible before adding new bearing grease and repacking things. The inner bearing is held in by a race and a seal, which were in good shape. So we'll just repack them from the back side of the rotor. This is messy work, but you got to press firmly your bearing cage and really work that bearing grease up into the roller bearings. And pull that guy back, recycle. Now we can put the rotor, complete with new packed bearings, back on the spindle. There's a spec for bearing preload on the spindle, but I always set it for a little bit of drag past an easy spin, so just so you get some resistance. Since we've handled the rotor surface with greasy hands, some brake cleaning spray and a towel clean up the rotor surface. So you can take away the grandpa stance of your stock truck and bring it down just enough. You can always go more aggressive with coil springs and a C-notch, but a spindle lowering kit, you can lose 4 inches in the rear and 2 inches up front, which levels the truck and drops it down. The wheels look great too, and they give you a great starting point for future upgrades and styling if you want to do more. But the best thing is that you don't have to cut the frame, and you can install this kit on jack stands. And I call that a win. So, in about a weekend, we've not only changed the look of our truck, but it's going to handle better. And even though it's the same dodgy paint job, the wheels give it a lift without doing any body work. And if I'm going to keep the patina, well, hey, I'm done for appearance. And that's no joke. Hey, patina's hot right now. Just saying.